The villains in Assassin's Creed, in my opinion, are not the strongest aspects of the games. There's villains that make you wonder why they're even part of the game, and there's some that you can resonate with. However, there's quite a few that I consider straight up terrible, which is why in this video, I'm going to go over my least favourite villains in Assassin's Creed. These villains are not just the main ones in their respective games, these can be the side villains too. Oh, and also the names that I mentioned in this video are not ranked in any particular order, so don't take into account where I'm putting these characters. It's also important to understand that these are solely my personal opinions. If you happen to disagree, that's completely fine. So without wasting any more time, let's just dive straight into it. Oh boy, where do I even start with this one? Assassin's Creed Odyssey was a game I have not had many issues with. There's a pretty okay story of uniting a family, unraveling a mystical spear, and also the Cult of Cosmos. Now personally, I really enjoyed the Cult of Cosmos part of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. The countless targets scattered throughout the world and also the engaging storyline really sold it for me. When I played through the Cult of Cosmos questline, I couldn't wait to actually find out who was behind it all. However, that's where it went downhill. The many hours I put into it was not worth it, because it turned out to be one of the least memorable villains I've ever seen in Assassin's Creed. And yes, I know it's not the main villain of the game. I mean, it was so silly that you could even romance with her during her big reveal. Name another game where you're able to romance the villain you've been searching for the entire game. It's a pretty confusing one because during the whole game, Aspasia is portrayed as an ally, a friend, and an overall trustworthy character. It felt like the game had the potential to set her up as a true antagonist behind the scenes. There was a lot, and I mean a lot of potential to make her memorable. Personally, I believe that if her reveal had been expanded into a more extensive mission, allowing us to gain a deeper understanding into her motivations, rather than just witnessing philosophical discussions in a cave, she could have been hailed as a much better villain. The three choices that the game gave to us were all completely stupid as well. The first choice being to engage in a very quick quote-unquote boss fight, which would last a few seconds. Then there's the second choice, which is the most weird one, which gives you the option to kiss her, which, I mean, why is that even a thing? And then there's the third choice, which was to opt to just let her go, once again raising the question of why is that even a thing? It also didn't exactly help knowing that throughout the game, clues like the ghost is a woman and the ghost controls Athenian politics were dropped quite early in the game, making Aspasia a highly plausible candidate because of her marriage to Pericles. So just knowing these hints early on makes it so painfully obvious that she was the leader. I actually believe that in 5 years time, if you were to ask me about Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Aspasia would be the last name on my mind. So yeah, overall she's just a villain that was far from memorable. Crawford Starrick is an interesting one for me. I previously made a video where I ranked my favourite villains and I included him quite high up there. But now that I look back at it and actually analyse his impact as a villain, I must say I got it wrong. You see, Crawford Starrick was a villain that was most competent and also incompetent. This is of course mainly the fault of storytelling in Assassin's Creed Syndicate. At the start of the game, we witness Starrick's complete control over London, effectively influencing all sectors of society from the shadows, which of course is an ideal scenario for any Templar Grandmaster. However, despite Jacob and Evie venturing into London without any apparent support, and then slowly one by one dismantling Starrick's whole operation, he just does nothing in response, which is not what a villain is supposed to do. Ubisoft initially presented Starrick as some sort of a brilliant scheming man who left his mark on London with buildings that contained his name, and even had a very nice looking moustache. However, his character as a villain was not developed at all. You see, it annoyed me a lot because the moment that Evie and Jacob arrived in London, Starrick all of a sudden was aware of them somehow. He had so many options at his disposal to get rid of them, but instead of him actually doing something about it, he decided to just sit down in his office, play the piano, sing songs, and just shout at the top of his lungs whenever he heard Evie and Jacob took down part of his operation. His boss fight, however, oh boy, that was one of the worst I've ever played. I mean, it basically consisted of stab, stab, block, block, stab, and then Starrick throwing you across the room and then repeating this with the other twin about 4 or 5 times. If we're talking about how good of a character he is in terms of his personality, I guess it's a positive. But in terms of actually being a good villain and doing his job, this was the most glaring issue in Assassin's Creed Syndicate. I'll be honest here, I played Assassin's Creed Origins twice and I often still forget who on earth Flavius is. And when I play Origins for the third time in the future, I'm still going to forget who Flavius will be. That, my friends, is what you call non-memorable. It became painfully evident to me just how inadequately Flavius was handled within the story as a whole. His goals and motivations alongside the Order of Ancients as a collective gave off this generic Templar archetype. Flavius in essence was a charisma lacking copy of Cesare, lacking that somewhat entertaining charm that defined Cesare's presence. I mean, Cesare even had a decent backdrop for his entire motivations, which is what makes a villain have a sense of depth. Flavius, however, had practically zero depth and suffered from a lack of real backstory or even proper development, ultimately portraying him as an entitled villain with some weirdly immature tendencies. You see, while both characters shared similarities, one was executed far more effectively, or at least Ubisoft made a valiant attempt to do so. I still often think to myself, really? This was the guy behind my son's death? It's massively underwhelming. For a character that I love so much as Bayek, it would have been refreshing to have an equally compelling villain, someone to create a balance and amplify the impact of Kemu's death, or even evoke strong emotions throughout Bayek's journey. I mean, Flavius barely even spoke to Bayek throughout the entire game, let alone acted as a meaningful component of Bayek's character development. I wasn't even relieved or satisfied when I ended up killing him, because both I as the player and even Bayek himself barely even knew him. I would even argue that Khaliset, or more commonly known as the Hyena, served as a more compelling counterpart to Bayek's growth and development. Khaliset often embodied Bayek's vulnerability and desperation, unable to find inner peace and forgiveness within herself for the loss of loved ones, which made her resort to extreme measures to bring them back. Personally, I felt that even somebody like Septimius, although only marginally, had a slightly more engaging presence when compared to Flavius. As much as I love Assassin's Creed Origins and everything it stands for, they really did shit the bed when it came to Bayek's conclusion, didn't they? Here's a completely fun and pointless fact for you. Did you know Vieri De Pazzi from Assassin's Creed 2 is voiced by Yuri Lowenthal, the same guy who voices Spider-Man in the PS5 game, as well as Sasuke from Naruto? Anyway, now that I have your attention and I said my fun fact, let's talk about this very annoying spoiled brat of a character, and that is Vieri De Pazzi, a character that had the most punchable face in the series. He was the prime example of a spoiled individual with way too much power. He had a desire to go to any lengths to get what he wanted, and on top of that was a massive coward. You see, he always challenged Ezio, and whenever Ezio confronted him, he'd just simply run away like a little biatch. He was always jealous of Ezio, and even attempted to kill him for just simply stealing the love of Cristina Vespuzzi. I definitely pronounced her name wrong. Any chance that Vieri had of ruining Ezio's life, he'd snap it up in the blink of an eye. It did not even end there, because he was a part of why Ezio's family was executed. You know, now that I think about it, I don't think there's a more universally hated character than Vieri. Even when Ezio killed him, he was still arrogant in his last words and did not confess. I mean, you're about to die, and he was still hell-bent on ruining Ezio's life. You see, I would gladly die on this hill and say that Vieri is my least favourite character in the entire series. Whether that be a villain, side character, or just anyone in general. He was like an annoying buzzing sound in the back of your ear, and Ubisoft purposely made his character so annoying just to get under our skins. So I guess I'll give Ubisoft props for portraying him like this. The villains in Assassin's Creed are not always good. This is a prime example of it. You see, this is a weird one to me because Revelations is the final game in the Ezio trilogy. So you'd most likely expect the villain to be one of the strongest parts of the game. But no, to me Prince Ahmet was probably one of the worst villains in this series. His entire character as a whole was so simple and predictable. His motives were generic. He just wanted power and did whatever he wanted to obtain it, such as recruiting a rebellion to join him. I will admit that some of the best parts of Assassin's Creed Revelations did feature Ahmet, but when I compare his actual presence as a villain to other villains in the series like an Al-Mualim or even a Haytham Kenway, it's not even close. It didn't exactly help that the game made his brother Selim kill Ahmet instead of us towards the end of the game off a cliff. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd have rather had the satisfaction of eliminating a thorn in our ass instead of his brother. I enjoyed Revelations a lot, but the villain aspect of that game was the big flaw. You see, Manuel is initially shown as the main antagonist, but Ezio lacked a personal connection to him, and then he gets disposed of rather easily, which barely left an impact. And then all of a sudden, Ahmet emerges as the main villain, but the entire transition felt way too quick. It felt like it just happened out of nowhere and left a lot of elements in Revelations to be desired. The story of Altair from Assassin's Creed 1 to Revelations was a very interesting one. I enjoyed seeing him go from an arrogant individual to a more composed and knowledgeable one. But there's one thing I noticed throughout his entire journey from Assassin's Creed 1 to Revelations, and that is one particular person being Abbas Sofian. If I had to describe the word slimy or even two-faced, Abbas Sofian's name would be under those words. I think it's pretty clear that this character was somebody I did not like. The thing with Abbas is that throughout the entire journey of Altair, he was just on a weird deep-seated grudge, and his entire motive was just to get revenge on Altair. But revenge for what? Well, nothing, because Altair was innocent. I feel like many people often overlook Abbas Sofian as an antagonist because he's overshadowed by Al-Mualim, who is the main villain of Assassin's Creed 1 and probably one of the most engaging ones in the entire series. Oh, and then Abbas was replaced by Altair, so he's just kind of stuck between the two most notable people of that time period. Abbas was driven by a false belief that Altair was the man responsible for his father's death, even though he wasn't. The amount of torment and blame that he put Altair through. I was kind of surprised that Altair didn't go completely nuts on his ass throughout Revelations, knowing that Abbas Sofian was the man who murdered Altair's wife and youngest son, as well as banishing Altair from the assassin's stronghold. Any shred of hope or feelings that I had for Abbas were completely gone, which is why when we actually got to kill Abbas, I must say it was probably one of the most satisfying things in Assassin's Creed. You know, now that I think about it, it felt like one of those moments where there's a fly in your room and you know it's there somewhere in the background, and the moment that you finally catch it and kill it is the best feeling. That's what killing Abbas Sofian felt like. So there you have it. Those are my least favourite villains in the entire series. Of course, this is purely my opinion and it's fine to disagree, but these are what I went with. Whether that be a poorly written character, an underwhelming reveal, or just an annoying useless villain in general. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It'll help me out a lot. And with that said, I'll see you in the next one.